There is some activity on Capitol Hill this week regarding the immigration crisis or issue, negotiating behind closed doors with senators. They are discussing ideas like making it a little bit tougher for migrants to pass the initial screening used by asylum officers to decide whether a person can stay in the country to pursue their asylum options or case. I doubt they'll be actually bringing back the Safe Third Country agreements, which President Biden ended 2 years ago. The president wants to tie this discussion of U.S. border sanctity or security with more aid to Ukraine. Okay. Every town and taxpayer, as you know, is affected by lax immigration and enforcement policy at what is designated as our southern border. Nearly 200 on the terror watch list were apprehended last fiscal year trying to enter this country illegally. And October was the most prolific or worst month ever for immigration. 240,000 people, individuals, entering illegally in 1 month. Cities like New York City cutting budgets to services to taxpayers due to the cost that the humanitarian or security crisis is having on communities large and small all over the country. New York City Mayor Eric Adams says that the issue of dealing with supporting and housing, feeding, schooling, providing medical treatment to those in New York City illegally could cost taxpayers $12 billion in that city. The country is basically being bum rushed, I guess you could say, swamped, inundated by those coming illegally. They just can't assimilate fast enough to our society and start contributing quickly enough. 8 million since Biden took office in January 2021. There's a huge cost to that. Republican leaders have also been complicit in the humanitarian crisis. And for all the talk of illegal immigration overwhelming our system and society, there is a legal pathway to immigration here, a way that adds to and integrates to the nation. But like the narrow gate, few actually choose that way to enter. One of them joins us today, and I am honored. You're going to love them. Mike Sylvester is a grassroots trainer for Americans for Prosperity, a group that made news this past week for endorsing Nikki Haley over Donald Trump in 2024. Mike, thank you very much for joining us.
Morning, Kevin. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
It's my pleasure. I'm really glad you carved out some time. And I recently was at a breakfast hosted by AFP featuring retired Chief Border Patrol Agent Chris Clem. It was an amazing experience, an amazing speaker with an unreal, incredible story about the border situation from that perspective of the chief, one of the chiefs of the border. But you, Mike Sylvester, was the speaker right before Chris Clem, and your message was powerful as well. Tell us a little bit about your story, Mike.
Sounds great. Thank you, Kevin. It's great to be here. And Chief Clem's got such a great story in terms of his experiences at the southern border. And he just gives such a wealth of insight on what we need to do to secure that. And on my end, I have a bit of a story related to the legal immigration process. I certainly have learned a lot about it over my lifetime. And I essentially immigrated legally to the United States from Canada, starting back in around late 2008, early 2009. My mom had a job transfer. She worked for Pioneer Hybrid DuPont at their headquarters in Des Moines, Iowa. And we were living in Mississauga, Ontario in Canada. And she ended up getting a promotion and a transfer out to the headquarters in Des Moines. And it was quite the process. I remember it started in late 2008, and essentially the business had to prove that she was the only qualified person for that job and that there was not an American who could fill it. And we had to do several layers of security background checks, including multiple trips to the border to present documents so that we could get approval. She came in on an L1 work visa, and we came in as her family on L2 work visas. And from there, it was quite the process just to go from going to the United States to becoming a citizen.
Now, you talk about the different visas and the L1, L2. How many family members were able to come across?
For me, it was my dad, my sister, and myself. So it was three of us along with my mom. And ultimately, these are determined by the quotas that are set by U.S. Customs and Immigration Services. it's a surprisingly low number. I think it's around 140,000, a number that hasn't been updated since the 1960s. And the craziest part is, you were talking about the border right now in that situation. We're getting millions coming in without going through that process, and yet our quotas only allow for 140,000 work visas, and the family visas along with that is not much higher.
140,000 legally each year through that process?
Yeah, that's what the quota allows for.
We had 240,000 illegally last month. That's incredible.
Yeah,
When your family was going through this process, now it took years, and we're going to get into that part of the story. Did you ever just, when you had to go visit the border station and hand in some of that paperwork, just say, I can walk across that bridge right now?
Yeah, it's we joked about that for sure, but obviously we wanted to follow the right process, and we had a great company in DuPont Pioneer who was sponsoring her and trying to make sure that everything was proper. But yeah, it's definitely something that people joke about, because the process was quite something for us, and it is for a lot of people who go through it. And to think that people just kind of walk across the border without having to do that is pretty mind-boggling.
Now, you're an amazing person. You have a very infectious personality. You and your family have added to the fabric of the United States just by going through the process legally, and what you and your family, all different members, have accomplished while you're now Americans, naturalized U.S. citizens. Does it anger you to see how freely people are able to just sort of, I used the term bum rush the system earlier?
It's very infuriating to a certain degree, for sure. You look at the process that a lot of people go through, including ours. And the craziest part is once you get in, then you have to apply for the green card, which for some people can take an extremely long time. We ended up getting lucky, and that took about 3 years for us to get a green card. And yeah, absolutely, it can be infuriating at times. But the thing for us is we wanted to make sure that we were following the letter of the law. And, we want to be able to live the American dream and create value for this country. And we wanted to do so in the proper legal channels.
So how long did it take? How long was the process as you tried to become an American legally?
It was a crazy process. So yeah, let me walk you through just kind of the whole thing from start to finish. As I've already mentioned, the vetting process kind of started in 2008, 2009. It cost the company thousands of dollars. We had to do multiple trips to the border. Once that happened, we then needed to apply for a green card, which they again do more background checks and interviews. You have to go in Des Moines, Iowa, it's called the Neil Smith Federal Building. So we had to go in there, present documentation, do biometrics, all of that. That process took about 3 years. And once you get the green card, you got to hold on to it for 5 years before you're eligible to apply for U.S. citizenship. So for me, I held on to it for 5 years, as did few members of my family. And in 2017, that was when I was eligible to apply for U.S. citizenship. So what they do there in that application process is quite something, because they go through your entire life history. You got to be able to tell them in your application all of your work history, all of your living history, several other things as well. And they ask you a series of different questions that you have to answer, like, are you a terrorist? Have you plotted to overthrow the U.S. government? Have you committed genocide? All of these different things. And here's the thing. If you mess up any part of that application, you got to start all over again. So you got one shot to really make that right. And we were very fortunate, and I was very fortunate, because we had a phenomenal immigration attorney who made sure that I filled out everything properly, that I had everything going. And that went really well. That cost thousands of dollars, but it was worth every penny. And once I submitted the application, it took about 4 or 5 months. And after that, I was submitted for biometrics, so fingerprint, eye scan, the whole shebang there. And after the biometrics, it was kind of a gray area. You weren't really sure when you were going to hear from them or anything along those lines. And so that took about 8 months after the biometrics. So this is well into 2018 at this point. Once the biometrics passed and everything was good, we went to the interview process, which is where I sat down with a member of the U.S. Customs and Immigration Service, and they asked me a series of questions. This is where you take the citizenship test that everyone asks about. you're given a list of 450 questions, and you need to answer. Yeah, a lot of questions. A lot of questions.
A lot of Americans aren't passing that one, myself included, probably.
It's I got some funny stories related to that because it is a ton of questions, really, and
you have to answer all of them. You have to take the test and fill in the oval, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you got to take the test, and they only ask you 10 of those 450, and you got to get 6 of them right. So with this process, I walked into the room with the U.S. Customs Immigration Service, and I remember one of the first questions he asked me, very, very nice individual, and he asked me, so Mr. Sylvester, are you a terrorist? And I just like, no. I always thought that question to be a little peculiar, because who would say yes to that question? Who's sitting there? And I just pictured some Al-Qaeda operative. They've somehow gotten through this whole vetting process. They've gotten to the stage right there, and then the customs agent asks, "Well, are you a terrorist?" And they just go, "Yep, you got me."
After 8 years, you got me.
Yeah, I've just always found the question to be peculiar, and so I just kind of went, no. And he goes, okay, so just wanted to stop you here. I'm just going to ask you a series of questions. They're going to sound weird.
Now, did that "are you a terrorist" question, did that count as one of your 10?
No. It
Okay.
was kind of like a vetting process, like a bunch of screening questions, and then they took you to the test. And so
it was your attorney behind.
That would be hilarious if that was one of the questions.
Was your attorney behind the agent shaking his head? No, say no.
Yeah, I mean, he was definitely hoping there was no funny business or anything like that. And basically he said, I'm going to ask you a series of questions that you'll probably find strange. Please just say no. Please just say no, so that we can keep moving through this process. And I said, okay, that sounds good. And the other questions were, have you committed genocide? Have you plotted to overthrow the U.S. government? Basically, all these questions that I don't understand why they ask them, because who would say yes to these questions if they were actually doing that? I'm assuming they knew in advance, and this was mostly just a way to seek out whether you were being honest with them or not. But the first question that I got was, who is the governor of Iowa? And at the time, I was doing consulting work with Governor Reynolds on a pretty regular basis. So I told myself, well, I mean, if I get this one wrong, I might as well just self-deport and kick myself out of the country, because I literally just spoke with her 3 days ago. So obviously the answer for Iowa at the time was Governor Kim Reynolds. If you're in Virginia, they would ask you who's the governor of Virginia. And the second question was, where's the Statue of Liberty? They take a lot of liberty with that answer. I said New York. They accepted it. You can say New York, New Jersey. There's a few other ones they take as well. The third question I got was, what are the 3 branches of government? So executive, legislative, judicial. The other one was, how many U.S. senators are there? I said 100, which was luckily correct. The other one was, who is the president of the United States? At the time, it was Donald J. Trump. And the last question was, what is one of your duties as a U.S. citizen, which is to defend and uphold the Constitution of the United States? I was lucky. I got all of them right. The customs agent was very nice. He asked me a pretty simple set of questions. He could have asked me any of those 450. And then from there was a writing portion to it and an English proficiency test. Once I passed all of that took a few months to process. And then I went to the U.S. citizenship oath ceremony, which is just such a special moment. I don't know if you've ever had a chance to go to one of those, but
I've been to 2 of them. A friend of mine had immigrated here when she was a young child and had an incredible story as being a refugee from the Vietnam War era. And I didn't realize that she wasn't a citizen. And she took that oath, and she invited me, along with her husband, to the ceremony. And it was one of the most touching, amazing things to witness in person. Every U.S. citizen should go to a ceremony, a naturalization ceremony. It's incredible. And I saw the second one at Ellis Island on a July 4th, which was incredible.
That's amazing. I mean, that would be quite the experience right there. And it is a surreal experience too. I absolutely loved it. It's a very proud moment in my life. I still remember the date, October 25th, 2018. And everyone who's gone through that process remembers that moment in time. And it's so great that you've had a chance, Kevin, to attend a few of these, including one on Ellis Island. I mean, that's that's the pinnacle of U.S. culture in a lot of different respects right there. So that's amazing. And it was a good feeling for me. I was able to recite the pledge. You listened to a note from the president. And I will say this in my session, and I'm curious what your sessions were like in terms of people. Mine had 35 attendees representing 19 different countries. But those 19 different countries, I can tell you every single person in that room, myself included, were very proud Americans that day. And it's just so great to be able to walk up across that aisle, shake a master ceremony's hand, and receive a certificate that really welcomes you to this great country. And so it was a very proud moment of mine. And to really go back to your original question, Kevin, of how long this took, it took roughly 9 to 10 years. But the big thing I want to stress is that I was one of the lucky ones, because there are people who wait their entire lives just to get green cards and just to get approval for immigration to the United States. So I was very blessed. I was very fortunate. And the process for me took about 9 to 10 years.
That is amazing. And you spent thousands of dollars, and now you have people spending thousands of dollars doing it the illegal way, which is ironic, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it is very ironic, and it's the numbers just keep going up. It's crazy.
Well, I'm really glad you were able to share part of your story with us to shed light on the difficulty that it is, because we hear how the journey for the illegal migrants is so difficult, but yours is just as difficult in different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really all about perspective on this aspect of it, and for me, it was a lot of waiting, a lot of being kind of kept in the dark. You never really knew how long the process was going to take or what exactly was going to happen next. But I was glad to go through the channel that I did, and I'm very proud and blessed to be in this country. So it's something that 10 times out of 10 I would do again.
Now, you are a very proud American at this point, contributing to our society. Was it odd to wash your hands of your Canadian citizenship? You grew up there.
Yeah, it was one of those things where, I grew up in Canada up until the age of about 14 in 2009. And I've been in the United States for almost the same amount of time, I think close to 14 years now. And I still go back to Canada to visit family and everything along with that. But, it's become clear to just about everybody that, including Canadians, that I'm definitely much more of an American than I am a Canadian these days. And it's kind of funny because I'll go back and I don't really have a Canadian accent, especially not anymore. And so whenever I go back to visit Canada, they'll go, "Oh, are you from the U.S.? Are you an American?" And it's kind of funny to me to see that transition over time.
That is really interesting. And right now you are the grassroots trainer for Americans for Prosperity. What exactly do you do?
Yeah, great question. So I love what I do as a grassroots trainer at Americans for Prosperity Foundation. And essentially my role is I travel around the country. I've been to, I think, over 35 states since I started in 2019. And my role is to help educate and equip people with the knowledge and skills they need to be effective advocates and effective leaders in their respective communities. And so immigration is an issue that I've had the chance to talk about a lot, especially as you mentioned with retired Border Patrol Chief Chris Clem. And we also do a lot of leadership seminars as well. So we have our grassroots advocate certification program, our grassroots mobilizer certification program, our grassroots leader certification program. And we run through the gamut of different things that you need to know to be effective in the political process, in making your voice heard, and most importantly, being an effective communicator so that you can help people achieve their version of the American dream.
Now, Americans for Prosperity made news this week. They're a household name right now because they picked a side in the Republican primary already, and they chose Nikki Haley. They're going to support Nikki Haley. Politics aside, for a moment, you think that this is a pretty unique choice.
Nikki Haley, it's fascinating because her story is one that I can definitely relate to. Her family immigrated to the United States legally from India. They started up a business, very hardworking individuals, and so she definitely growing up as someone who was born in the United States to immigrant parents and as a first-generation American, I can certainly relate to that on a lot of different fronts. And it is really quite extraordinary as you start to learn more about her story, about how hardworking her family was, how much they loved America, how much they continue to love America, and how she came to appreciate that through her family that came to the United States legally. Mike
Sylvester, grassroots trainer, Americans for Prosperity, describing hurdles of becoming a U.S. citizen from his own personal experience. I really appreciate your time, Mike, and we'll probably have you on again at some point just to discuss the immigration issue.
That sounds great, Kevin. It's always a pleasure talking with you, and I really appreciate you having me today. It was awesome meeting you, and I definitely hope to keep in touch.
You bet. Thank you very much, Mike. Have a great week and safe travels to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited. Like I was telling you just a little bit earlier, I'm headed to Tennessee, Bradenton, Florida, and Houston coming up. So I'm super pumped for all of that.
That's incredible. Keep up the good work. It was a pleasure meeting you, and thanks for joining us here on WCBM.
Thank you, Kevin, and same to you.